Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Angel, and today I am so excited to be doing some Victorian style Christmas DIYs. Starting with this first project, I just grabbed some of these little taper candle holders from Dollar Tree. You can definitely use thrifted candle holders, whatever you have on hand, and then some of these clear ornaments, the bigger size from Dollar Tree as well. And then I'm just going to use some gel super glue to attach both of these to the tops of those candle holders. Then to decorate these, I'm going to be using some of these air dry clay molds that I got from Amazon. I have this cute little Nutcracker one that I absolutely love, and I'm just taking tiny pieces of my air dry clay and making those 3 nutcrackers. I've been asked quite a few times how I use the smaller molds and actually use the air dry clay in them. This is exactly how I do it. I just pinch my air dry clay apart and make it into smaller pieces, and then just kind of push those down into the mold, making sure the clay is actually going down on the sides, and then just break more small pieces and press those together, and they come out perfectly with no cleanup and no breakage. So I also ended up doing the little ballerina the exact same way, just breaking that clay into teeny tiny little pieces and pressing it down into the mold. I ended up doing a frame piece out of one of my molds, and then also a little decorative piece to put on the one that I'm going to be using the nutcrackers on. So I glued that frame down with the ballerina, and then you see here I glued all 3 of my nutcrackers and that little decorative piece on top. And then here I'm just mixing a little bit of brown and black paint. I didn't want this to be totally black, but I also just didn't want it to be a light brown. I wanted a darker brown color for this underneath color because I'm going to be turning this into faux brass. And I ended up doing 2 coats of this on each one, covering the candle holder, the mold, and the Christmas ornament. Then once those were dry, I'm going to go in with some European Gold Rub and Buff and my little brush here, and I am just going to cover these entire pieces. Then to finish these off, I am using some red velvet ribbon, just making some little bows, gluing those to the tops of here, and then adding in some candles. For this project, I'm going to be using this very pretty sconce shade that I actually got out of my house. It had this really cute Christmas tree looking design on it, so I thought this would be perfect for Christmas. I'm also going to be using this little spindle piece. I got this off of an old coat rack that we had in the attic, and I just used my miter saw to cut the piece off that I wanted to use. Now I want to make this very sturdy, and since this is glass, I didn't want it to break, so I'm actually going to use this little scrap piece of wood as a brace, and I'm going to drill through here and then drill up into the handle part. But before I do all that, I do want to decorate this just a little bit more, and I'm going to be using my Nutcracker clay mold again, and I'm going to make 6 of these little nutcrackers. Then I'll just glue these on to the sconce in between those little tree designs using some gel super glue. I'm going to let those clay pieces dry for a few hours. Since they're so small, they don't really take too long to dry. But while I'm waiting for those to dry, I am going to paint that little spindle piece using some burnt umber paint because I really just didn't care for the orangey red look of the wood. So I just wanted to darken that up a bit. Once the clay pieces were pretty much dry, I'm just going to go in and do a single coat of white chalk paint over this entire thing just to make everything nice and cohesive. And for the final touch on this little bell, I'm going in with some of my European Gold Rub and Buff, and I'm only going over the details of those little pieces that look like Christmas trees and then over the nutcrackers. I pre-drilled both of my wood pieces and added in a wood screw to that bottom piece that's going to come up from the bottom of the sconce, and then all I had to do was just screw that top piece down onto there and make sure it was nice and tight so that if anyone picks this up, it will be very sturdy. You could definitely use a strong glue like E6000 if you wanted to, but I just wanted to be extra careful since this is glass, and if you wanted to add a little ringer in the bottom, you could just add a string to that little wood piece. To finish it off, I just added some more of my red velvet ribbon right to the top of it. For this project, I'm going to be using this painting print that I actually got from another YouTube creator. She has an Etsy store, and I will make sure I link it below for you. But I just ended up having this printed off at Walgreens on a 16 by 20 board print so that it's a little thicker. And before I had this printed off, I did go in and desaturate her belt because it was green, and I'm going to be using some red velvet ribbon in this project, and I didn't want it to clash. I also desaturated her hair because she had more orangish red hair. And then once I had this printed off, I did make my own mat for it using some black velvet adhesive paper. So like I said, I'll be using some more of that red velvet ribbon that I got from Amazon on this project, and I just thought it would be very cute to do like a corset ribbon on the back of her dress using this red velvet ribbon. So I'm also going to be using these paper brads from Amazon. These are like an antique goldish color that I got, and this is going to help me make her little corset strings. So I'm just using this poker tool, and I'm poking a hole through the ribbon and then through this thick board so that I can push these brad nails through, and then I'm just opening them up on the back side. Then I'll flip this back over, and I'm gonna do the right hand side, just doing the same exact thing, pushing that little hole maker down through the ribbon and then through the board, and then opening up the brad on the back side. Now I'm just gonna do the lacing of this corset dress, and what I'm doing here is just kind of pulling up that brad and then tucking the corner of the ribbon up under it and then pulling it across to the other side, making another hole right under that first one, and then pinning the ribbon down. Then I'm going to move back to the other side and bring that ribbon across that second piece. And again, I'm going to go right under that first brad and put this second one. And I'm just going to continue lacing this downward using those brads, and I'm going to do this all the way down until I get to her belt. Once I get down to her belt, to finish this off, I'm just going to tie a really pretty bow right here, and I'm actually going to leave a lot of that excess ribbon hanging down because once I put this in a frame, then that ribbon is going to hang over it. For this project, I'm using these little legs that came off of a table that I actually repurposed for my son's room. So I kept them to make some Victorian inspired feather trees. Now I have a longer one, and then I also wanted to do a smaller little tree, and the bases for these are actually just wood pieces from Dollar Tree. So to start this project, I needed to figure out exactly how long each of my pieces were. The larger one ended up being about 2 feet, and then the smaller one was half that size. So once I figured out how large they were, then I was able to calculate where I needed to put my holes, and I just marked 4 holes on each spot where I wanted to put the branches. Then I used a small drill bit and pre-drilled all of my holes that I would need for my branches, and I also screwed the base into the bottoms. Then to make everything cohesive and darken up this wood some, I'm using some acrylic paint in the color Dark Umber and painting the bases and the little spindle pieces. I'm going to be starting with the larger tree, and I'm actually just going to be using these cedar stem picks that I got from Amazon, and I'll make sure I have these linked below, but these were definitely a lot cheaper than actually buying a Victorian feather tree online. They can be quite expensive. These stems weren't quite long enough, so I did end up putting 2 of them together to make the bottom part of the tree, and I'm just using some floral wire from Dollar Tree to do that. So I just ended up using this first one that I made, and I made 3 more the same size for the bottom part of the tree because, like I said earlier, each part of this tree is going to have 4 stems sticking out, and then I just trimmed down that bottom piece a little bit so that it would fit closer to the spindle part. I didn't glue these into the holes just yet because I wanted to use one of these bottom pieces so that I could make the next row just a little shorter. And again, I used 2 pieces per stem for this, but just made it a little shorter. And then I made 3 more that size for that row. Moving up to the next row, I only ended up needing to use 1 stem per hole and just cut the ends off so that it would fit snug against the spindle. Then continuing up to the next row, the best thing about these is these cedar stems are kind of broken up into sections. So I just ended up cutting off this first section for this next row up. And then once I cut these down, I was able to just kind of twist off that bottom green part so that I would have a little bit of stem sticking out to put into the holes. Then moving up to the next row, I just kind of did the same thing, except this time I pulled down 2 sections of the cedar stem to make these even shorter, and then just did the same thing, kind of twisting off that green part. And to finish this off for the top part of my trees, I'm just cutting down another one of those cedar stems, and then I just grabbed some pieces that were left over from the pieces that I had previously cut, added those to it just to make it a little bit more fluffy, and then this will be the top portion of the large tree. Now for the smaller tree, I actually decided to use these pine stems. Again, I got these from Amazon, and you can definitely just use cedar stems for this, but I kind of wanted to mix it up, and I already had these pine stems. So I figured I would use these for the smaller one, and I'm actually just kind of doing the same thing. For this bottom portion of the tree, I am putting 2 stems together and then using some hot glue to glue these into those little holes that I had pre-drilled. And then just like with the big tree, I'm just going to make smaller branches for the next row and just keep cutting them down all the way to the top. Then just like with the big tree, once I got to the top, I just made a little top piece to glue down in there. To finish these off for now, I am again using some of that red velvet ribbon, and I'm making ribbons for the top of each of these. And that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed these Victorian Christmas DIYs. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.